Welcome in, everybody. Fun fact for the day, beans on toast is not really breakfast. Now let's start the show.
Turn up your volume. Because you're about to listen to The Sick Podcast.
Rays Rewind with Buschman and Drew.
Jansen. That is into center field. Here comes Kiermaier. Phillips has tied the game. Arose Arena coming around. Throw home. Now he stumbles. But the ball gets away. Tampa Bay wins it. Brett Phillips, Game 4 hero.
The sickest Tampa Bay Rays podcast. It's gonna be sick.
Welcome in, everybody, for another edition of the Rays Rewind podcast, the sickest Tampa Bay Rays podcast on the Sick Podcast Network. I am one of your hosts, the great Buschman, and as usual, joining me is Drew, not drinking because we're recording this show in the morning, but if he was, that's okay. That's okay. Remember to go to our YouTube page and hit the subscribe and notification bell at the Sick Podcast Rays Rewind. Drew, how are you? How was your Father's Day?
It was good, man. My wife let me sleep in a little bit, which with a newborn is
that's awesome.
Very,
I wish my wife would have let me sleep in.
Yeah, so. Very helpful and very much needed. We also had a hospital stay last week for my newborn. I had a little procedure done, so we didn't get much sleep last week. So the extra catch up on sleep yesterday was huge for me. So it got off to a great start, and then we had just good food. We didn't do a whole lot. We just hung out and took it easy. So how about you?
Yeah, I saw my dad and then came back and swam in my pool for the rest of the day. And it was just like,
nice.
Okay. Yeah, it was nice. It didn't rain at all until after everybody went to bed. So it was good. It's a good time.
I didn't realize you have a pool in your backyard. I gotta come back down to Florida. We gotta.
Yeah, man. I've got a nice Blackstone out there. It's nice. It's very nice. So it's like an island oasis, and I have a huge big screen TV, and I figured it out that maybe I should get Bally's and put it on that one and then watch the games outside because I have a Samsung TV, and for some reason it doesn't like Bally's. It doesn't have the apps on my smart TV in my living room. So I was like, all right, I'll bite the bullet, I guess. Yeah. Even though the Rays are doing Rays things, obviously they won yesterday 8-6 against the Braves with a little help from some home runs. Jose Siri saving the day once again for the Rays in the ninth, hitting a 2-run shot, breaking the 6-6 tie, even though the Rays were up by a lot. And they, of course, gave up the lead to have that 6-6 tie going into the ninth. Rays eventually winning 8-6, taking one of the games out of the series against the Braves, which I think you and I kind of predicted that was going to happen. They would probably win one of those games, I think.
I said they were going to get swept. I did correctly predict 2 of 3 against Chicago. I was optimistic for that series, but I think I went with a sweep the wrong way.
The wrong way, yes.
Braves, and was unfortunately close to being right once again. But happy they pulled out the victory. I just knew that was going to happen. It seems like between these series against good teams. Most recently the Braves, obviously, and then the Orioles series on the road.
It's expected.
They seem to somehow, even though they don't necessarily play well, somehow always find a way to win the last game by the skin of their teeth, which goes to show how hard it is, even when you have, discrepancies in talent in baseball, how hard it is to actually sweep.
And also too mysterious, illnesses too. Caballero was a sideline with apparently what I heard, it was 100-pound legs, tingling in his fingers, and he didn't feel well. Also with Taylor Walls not feeling well as well. So both of those guys hopefully will get better soon. Drink some Gatorade, get some Alka-Seltzer Plus tablets and see how they go. But definitely the Rays were doing Rays things against the Braves, which we all thought they were going to do. Kind of more of the same. I mean, it's expected. I mean, we're still 4 games under 500 right now, still in the bottom of the barrel of the AL East, with 1 game separating us and the Toronto Blue Jays sharing that crown. What was your? I mean, look, the Cubs series was, I think, a needed series win. Obviously, coming back from from Baltimore, just getting pounded and everything.
Mm-hmm.
Winning against the Cubs was kind of an uptick, even though most of the fans at Tropicana Field were Chicago based.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I agree with you. I think them playing against the Cubs and winning is kind of like a good shot in the arm, especially going against a sub 500 mediocre team like the Cubs are.
Mm-hmm.
But I think
Identical records at this point now. Looks like
yeah,
37,
exactly.
38.
I think going into more series against teams above 500 that are in the playoff race, as we say per
Mhm.
night now, it's kind of be. I think it's going to be more of the same. We're going to see them get pounded a couple of the games, and then the last game of the series, they're probably going to win that one out of the skin of their teeth, like they did against the Braves. But other than that, it's just,
Yeah.
look, it's expected as expected, and that's what I think you and I have agreed upon. It's just like, look, this is the team that we have, and if they are trying to make a playoff push, they've got to make some kind of move. But this is the team that we have, and signs of improvement. No, it's more of the
Yeah.
same.
It's just like you said, it's the same, more of the same. There's just absolutely nothing being shown on the field that
Except Taylor Walls, that play on against the Cubs was fantastic.
Well, he's doing Taylor Walls things in the field, which is always fun to see.
Right.
He's the closest thing to an energy booster, momentum changing kind of guy that we have in the field since obviously Kevin Kiermaier in center. But there's just nothing on the field, big picture wise, that suggests, from what we've seen over the last week since we last recorded, that suggests that we're getting out of it. I got suckered in to believing going into Atlanta. I was under the impression Taylor Wall's double play that he made to seal the win on Thursday. Just really, I was like, man, they're just fired everybody up. You saw emotion from everybody on the team, even guys like Isak, at first pumping his fists, Brandon Lau. You could see the guys in the outfield, like the whole team was fired up, and I was like, okay, that's, I get like everybody gets excited about a walk off or whatever, so we see emotion then, but felt like that was a huge boost for the team, in a different way. It was just a different type of play that we haven't seen
in a while
for this team in a while. And so I thought, given that the implications of that one play, not to say that Pete couldn't have gotten out of that inning without giving up a run, but just knowing that sealed the win and the emotion they showed after the fact, I started talking myself into like, okay, this is going to be maybe a different series. The Braves are struggling. Obviously, they have a great lineup, even with all the injuries they have. And so, and then they go out to the early lead, 1-0, all three games actually. But, in the first, they of course, per usual, first they had second and third, I think 0 outs, 1 out with the 1 run in, and they couldn't do anything else. But happy to see they get out to a quick lead. And then, it was short lived. Pepio gives up 7 runs over 2 innings, I think. And just an absolute clunker. So then I was like, okay, well, never mind. Like I felt like I, for a very short amount of time, had
high hopes,
the same belief of like, okay, I know it's we're 4 games out of the wild card, but maybe we could take 2 or 3 here, and then it's just going to be a slow build up to. Then we got Minnesota next week, so for maybe 3 games or fewer going into that series, and hey, anything could happen, but I just was reminded once again that this team is simply just not good enough right now. And it's not early. It's not bad luck. If anything, they're lucky to be where they are. And if it's easy to get pessimistic. If you look back at their schedule, and I'm not being doomsday, or I'm not being overly pessimistic here. They are literally a play or 2 away from being on a 10-game losing streak. I don't think it'll be
that
good.
bad. I don't think it'll be that bad. I'm hoping it won't be that bad. I mean, I'm looking at the schedule too, and it's a tough one. I mean, the 3-game set against Twins coming up is going to be tough because the Twins are a good team.
Oh no, I'm talking retrospectively.
Oh, retrospectively. Oh,
Like,
yeah.
retrospectively, I mean, they had the 4 losses against Baltimore. The 5-2 win is deceiving because that was they were down 2-0, 2-1 in the ninth, and they scored 4, 2-1. So they scored 4 in the bottom of the ninth because of the 3-run homer. And then, the 3-2 win was by the skin of their teeth, right? They scored 3 in the 7th to take the lead there. Like, again, these are not dominant wins by any means. So you could have said, either way in that series, right? They could have swept the Cubs or they could have been swept because every game was super close, scoring super late, that type of game. And then you look at the Atlanta series, I mean, they're 6-6 in the 8th. Again, like Jose Siri coming up big in the 9th inning there with the homer, but very easily could have gone the other way. So I just there's so much more evidence of this team performing, I feel like, above what their record is above what we've seen on the field, what they're worthy of having at this point. So
I can agree with that.
I'm more pessimistic. And I mean, the fact of the matter is they're 6 games out of the last wild card spot, 6.5 out of the second wild card spot, and a mile away from sniffing the first wild card spot with Baltimore. And that's not even.
That's never going to happen. That's not happening.
So it's just there's not a lot to be excited about for this season right now. I mean, unless they just go on some unforeseen run. But again, you look at the schedule and you mentioned, I'm not saying they're gonna go.
That's something I wanted to ask you too. Is let's do some hypotheticals right now. I mean, hypothetically, if going into the All-Star break, they get their bearings, you have a couple team meetings, and then straight out the gate, the second half, they're on a tear and they're on their way. Some miraculous turnaround happens.
Yeah.
I want you to give me a percentage of that likely happening. And also too, they make a couple of trades that, help out with some needs. Hypothetically, what's the percentage happening?
I would say just because anything can happen, I would say 2%.
Okay, because I mean we've seen World Series champion teams like this. They're sub 500 going into the All-Star break, and then all of a sudden they go on a tear and they win it all.
It's just I don't know, and I don't know enough about those teams. I know the first one I think of. I think the Braves the year they won it.
The Rangers too. The Rangers too, when they won it, I think what?
Well, they were out to a strong start. They got off to a really good. They were like the AL West leaders for a while, and then they, in the second half, is when they actually started going down because the Astros just kind of hung around, and then they won the division on the last day.
Right.
So the Rangers, that was what was surprising, was that they had the opposite. It was they were so strong to start the year, and then they just had kind of a gradual slump. Coming back down to earth over the second half. And then, and then against all odds, right, they lose the division on the last day. I believe they went all the way down to the third wild card spot, or no, the second wild card spot, because they played, the Rays, who were the first wild card spot, had to go cross country, and then they just dominate, in the playoffs. It's just, you never know what could happen. But yeah, I would say 2%. Like, I mean, again, like I said, I don't know, like the Nationals, I know were not a good team for the first half of the year they won it, but off the top of my head, they had some real stars on that team. I don't know what they were performing or what their stats were. I am sure they weren't nearly as bad as what the Rays are right now offensively.
It's just the run differential that we have is just terrible.
Oh yeah, it's just much more in line with like the Angels or like the Athletics.
When you said like the stars on the team, there isn't really any big stars that can carry it. I mean, our stars right now aren't really doing their jobs right now, like a Rosarena and Andy Diaz.
No, I mean,
not.
Yeah. I mean, no one's really making an impact. I mean, obviously the biggest impact recently has been Jose Siri and Brandon Lau, which is great.
Yeah.
I'm having a hard time getting too excited about this team at the moment because I personally have resigned myself to the fact that this is not a playoff team this year. So I've
noticed that. I think you kind of you're kind of checked out a little bit.
I'm not checked out in the sense of I'm not checked out in the sense of I'm not paying attention, nor do I not care. It's more
Mm.
of I am much more in the camp of this is not a playoff team this year. I want this team looking ahead to how they can be better for next year because they're going to
Yeah.
have a great foundation next year with the pitching. You would think, right? We thought that this year, but certainly a lot more established arms that will be healthy next year than what we had this year.
Mhm.
And then with some up and comers. So I'm just that's where I'm at. And until they go on a big winning streak or until they somehow make a big move up the standings, like that's just where I expect this team to be is not a playoff team right now. So I have a hard time getting pumped up or too excited about us scraping together a win against the Braves,
Yeah.
where it's especially guys when it's guys that I know won't be a part of the team next year. Now, Jose
Right.
Siri, maybe I don't know what his arbitration will be. I don't know what the cost benefit of keeping him around will be. I don't know what they'll decide to do there. But like we can pretty much guarantee Braden Lau will not be on this team next year.
I think it's kind of perfect timing that he's
Right.
doing well. Just in like around the corner is the trade deadline where you could probably flip him for
You know,
some value now. You know,
absolutely. I mean, if it's guys like Richie Palacios, maybe Isak, although I don't know. I'm not convinced that
I don't
they're
want
gonna
Isak to go, even though you can
I
get a
know,
maximum value out of him. I don't want him to go because
I know.
he's
I just
so good. He's so good in the lineup.
yeah, I just don't it just like to be honest with you, this was my thought process yesterday. And people may call me maybe not a good fan or, loyal fan or whatever. But when Jason Adam gave up the game tying homer, I certainly in that moment was not expecting the Rays to win the game.
Mhm.
I thought, okay, here we go again. Our best relievers going out there, getting a chance to shut the door and giving up the lead. Clevenger did that against the Cubs. Last week and has had a rough week and a half or so. I know he didn't do well against the Orioles. Jason Adam coming in, giving him that home run. And the thought I had was, okay, finally, I can be put out of my misery. This season is over. Like this team as currently constructed is not making the playoffs. I don't have to keep holding out hope that this team now 6 games back from a wild card spot could have been worse, right? In that moment, it could have been 7 games.
Mhm.
Um, we are done. Like this team is not a playoff team. We don't have to keep acting like this team is going to turn it around and be something they're not because they are not good enough. And we can finally just say, all right, what can we do to get better for next year? How can we get guys up? And I like for me, it was just okay, some closure. Like I don't have to hold on to this team anymore this season. I can start thinking about okay, the guys on the team now that are going to be contributors next year,
Right.
whether that's guys like Palacios, Taj Bradley, Pepio, guys in the minors. And so for me, it was okay, that's fine. And then when Jose hit the home run, to be honest, I was a little frustrated. I was like, now
What you're
I got
describing, it kind of reminds me of that scene in The Godfather Part 3 where Al Pacino, obviously Michael Corleone, he
Mhm.
goes, every time every time I'm out, they pull me back in.
I know.
That's how I feel for you because I think that's what you're like. It's like, oh, I thought I was out, but now I'm back in because of that. And I'm looking at the schedule coming up, and it's like this could be another possibility of another bad stretch. You got Twins, you got Seattle, who's a playoff team, and I mean, I'm even nervous about the Pittsburgh series because they are going to be going up against Paul Skeens on the last game.
Yep. Yeah,
So
Paul Skeens and Jared Jones.
if there was an opportunity for Paul Skeens to get his first no hitter, it'd probably be against the
oh
Rays.
yeah. Or what'll happen is he's wild or they somehow scratch across a run or two in the first and then don't touch him the rest of the game.
Right.
That seems to be a theme for us.
If
Yeah, I mean,
anybody, if you're on the Hard Rock betting app, if you want to pick the over on how many strikeouts Paul Skeens is going to have, pick the over.
the
I'll pick
over,
the
absolutely.
over, absolute over.
I mean, honestly, you look at the next week. I mean, the Minnesota series. We talk about winning series. If you're winning series, that's good. I mean, I think against Minnesota, it's got to be a series win there because if you
Yep.
lose 2-1 or God forbid you get swept. I mean, you're looking at a 9-game deficit. It's over. Like this
Yeah.
this series coming up could be the nail in the coffin, or it could be what gives them energy and the momentum to make a run up the standings. But like this is the biggest series of the year, and it's not going to get talked about it because it's just Minnesota. But like a sweep against the Twins the wrong way, you're looking at a 9-game deficit in the wild card. It's done. There's no going back from that. It is over. 2-1. Okay, now we're 7 games back, and then you obviously 2-1 in our favor. It's 5 games, a sweep, 3 games back. Now you're cooking with gas. Now you're looking at okay, like we're not out of this by any stretch. But I mean, this could be a bad week. Like in baseball, is weird. I mean, you can have bad matchups pitching wise that aren't in your favor and still win. Like I understand that, but knowing this Rays offense and how bad it's been all year, when you got to go up against Pablo Lopez and Joe Ryan, who I'm sure Joe Ryan will get up for the Rays, and then Jared Jones and Paul Skeens, and then you even look to Seattle, who's always played the Rays tough. You get their 2 best pitchers in Luis Castillo, which I know he hasn't performed as well this year, but George Kirby, like it just doesn't matter. Like there's so many tough matchups coming up that these next 3 series it's going to be tough for them to win any of them, in my opinion.
So if you're saying if they don't go 500 through the next couple of series,
I think it depends on who they go 500 against. Like if they win 3 against Minnesota and sweep them, and then go 3-3 against Pittsburgh and Seattle, I think you're looking at a much better standing than if you lose 3 against Minnesota, and then whatever that math would be, 5-1, 6-1. I don't know what 6-1 or no. I can't do the math right now.
It's okay.
I guess
it's early in the morning.
Yeah. So, it would be, or they would have to be 5-4, I guess, because 9 games can't go 500 in 9 games. But you know what I mean? Like if they lose 3 against Minnesota and get swept, it's over. There's no need to talk about this year anymore as far as playoff chances. So this is a huge series coming up. I just, the pitching matchups aren't in their favor. I mean, it's Savali and Taj Bradley and Zach Littell. And I mean, the offense is going to have to come up big against some good pitchers. So they're going to have to
see if this happens, we're going to have to start talking about stadium stuff, and I don't really want to do
stadium that. And trade deadline.
Trade deadline. Actually, I'm fine talking about trade deadline stuff because that's more fun than talking about the performances we've seen already.
Yeah, and the Rays do so well typically, not always perfect, but they do so well in scouting other teams, minor league and major league talent, underutilized talent, whatever you want to call it, that it gets me excited, especially as knowing the state of mind I'm in about this team, which is I'm more focused on 2025. When guys like Junior Caminero come up, or even hopefully if they're aggressive with some of their other prospects in Durham, or even like a guy like Chandler Simpson, who's a college bat who's tearing it up in Double-A. Like once those guys start coming up, and not saying Chandler Simpson would be this year, but like guys like Junior Caminero, like guys I know that are going to be contributors for next year and beyond, that's going to get me fired up again about this team and watching this team. Right now, I'm just watching this team
just to watch
and see what happens, and to see if they can get me pulled back in for this year, because it is hanging on
by a thread, which we said last show.
Yeah, it's just,
I love Ray's Twitter. Ray's Twitter fans they're so cute sometimes. When Jose Abreu got released by the Astros, a lot of them were like, "Hey, let's go pick up Jose Abreu," and part of me was like,
"I've ever heard."
Yeah, exactly. I was like, "No, why? No, that's
who's he gonna."
Are the Rays going to take on the $30 million left on his contract? No, it's not happening.
Yeah,
guys, you're cute. You're so cute. It's so cute, but stop. Just stop it.
The last thing we need is another slow right-handed bat.
Yeah,
at the corner.
Who's 37 years old? Just stop.
Yeah, he's. I think he's done. I mean, unless some team takes a flyer on him for a spring training invite next year, I think he's probably done. So we'll see. I mean, it's just there's not much to get excited about. I mean, I'm glad they won yesterday, but again, they just got.
I'm glad they won because they avoided
teams that are any good. I mean,
they avoided this. They avoided the sweep, but they could have won that game by not coming back. I mean, by breaking the tie.
There's every game's close. Every game is close. That's why their run differential is so bad, because they lose poorly.
Mm-hmm.
And I
was looking at the score. They were up I think 6-2, and then all of a sudden it's 6-6. I'm like, are we doing this again? Like I thought we were rolling into this game and rolling along, and this will be a nice, easy win. You won't get swept, and all of a sudden 6-6 going into the ninth. I'm like,
Yep.
The odds of them pulling off a win against the Braves is highly unlikely, and then all of a sudden series saves the day. So I mean, if it wasn't for his heroics once again, they probably would have gotten swept either in the ninth or in the extra innings because of just how the season has gone, especially with them in extra inning games. It's yeah. I mean, look, folks, we like to be positive on this show, but face the facts.
We gotta be realistic. This is not a good team. They are 6 games out of a wild card.
Yep.
Spot, like the last wild card spot. And there's the teams that are in front of them are teams that have played the Rays really tough, that have better lineups and better pitching performances. I'm not saying they have better talent, but they've played better this year. And the run differentials are just not even close.
Yeah.
Like the closest team in run differential that's ahead of them is the Blue Jays, and they're 40 runs better in differential. So they're a miracle to be where they're at. Again, if they're a playoff team and they can make a run up standings, it's because they're showing and playing in a way and showing us things that they haven't done yet this year. It's not at this point. I mean, they're 72 games into the season, so almost halfway there, and this is what we got this year, and it just hasn't worked out. So, I mean, Evan, I feel like depending on how this Twins series goes, the next episode we might have, we might be talking more
like a funeral.
Deadline.
Like a funeral.
Yeah, funeral, trade deadline. At that point,
like that kind of.
Yeah, basically, funeral? At that point, it becomes a conversation of who's on their way.
I'm okay. See, I'm actually looking forward to that show because I like the scenarios of like who's going to be dealt, what can we get back. I like that more than talking about the race right now.
Because it gives you hope for a better.
Yeah,
team.
Exactly. It's like, hey, this could be fun. Let's do some scenarios about trades.
They got to shake things. They've been saying for the whole year they got to shake things up, and
they haven't. And the thing is, Drew, they haven't done that.
No, and they're not going to. I mean,
they're not.
The Times article, I know Topkin put out an article about they're going to stand pat. I mean, they're not going to bring up guys.
It blows my mind. It blows my mind.
It won't happen.
Like the whole standing pat thing is like, so that to me says, if you're standing put where you're at, you're not going to make any kind of shuffle or make any kind of move to kind of maybe shake things up a bit. That tells me you're almost waving the white flag. You're almost telling the fans, hey, look, we have what we have. We're not interested in shaking things up. We're not going to really make any kind of trades. If we are, we're going to be selling when it comes to the deadline, unless there's a miraculous turnaround. But right now, we're standing pat because we pretty much know where this team is going to go at the end of the year. So we're halfway waving the flag, but we're not waving the flag. We'll see what happens after the deadline. And if we're for the same spot after the deadline or even worse, then we're going to be standing pat even more because that's the product that we have on the field.
And then why bring Junior Caminero up when we're not competing?
Yeah. I can agree with that. It's like, why bring him up when you don't need to?
I think that's what they'll do. I'm joking. I think he's coming up after the deadline, no matter.
I don't think why? Then why? Because because he's
going to be your starting third baseman next year.
So just get him in for reps.
Yeah,
to get him used to it,
especially in a year, because then when you're out of it, it becomes okay. Especially the team that looks ahead, like the Rays, are always playing for tomorrow. True. I just think you're going to see guys like Curtis Mead, Aranda, and depending on how the trade deadline goes, obviously. But like if they trade away, some guys are getting regular spots. I think we don't have to get too much into it, but guys like Ahmed Rosario, I think would be an easy guy to trade away. Obviously, not going to do you any good this year on a non-contending team. He could bring back something. Then you have bigger discussions about some bigger players like Yandy, Brandon Lau, some of the pitchers like in the bullpen. So I just think at that point you would reach a point where you say, okay, well, we got to get these other guys more regular at bat. So you're going to create lanes for that to happen. I I think that I don't think they're going to do anything until after the All-Star break. I think it's
I
going to
agree.
be the All-Star break. And then, but even at this point, like even if I think the reality is that even if they're in contention, if they make a run and they're only less than a handful of games back, they're 3 games back, whatever. I think you easily could still see them do some sort of like
Shuffle.
sell and buy scenario where they're selling a guy like Eflin.
Mm-hmm.
And then, because they got guys, they got Springs coming back.
Rasmussen's coming back.
Yeah,
Bob's
whether that's
back,
as a starter or bullpen guy this year, like you have guys coming back that could fill that spot. So I could see them saying, okay, well, yeah, we're still going to contend because we're not out of it, but we're going to take advantage of the market and trade a guy like Eflin to get a return that's going to help us, this year or next year or whatever they get back for him. So I think regardless, some guys are going to go because they're
already. So I think I don't know if it was Ken Rosenthal the other day. The Rays are already taking calls on Yandy,
yeah, and
Randy, and Brandon Lau. They're already fielding calls already. So I mean, it's I think the trade
and the
trade
and Eflin, right?
I
haven't seen anyone else say. I think maybe I saw one other article maybe about Eflin. I mean, the teams are going to come calling because they got.
I honestly, Drew, I think they're calling right now, and like the trade station is already starting to get buzz and start churning right now.
And then you got to have the discussion of, okay, there's merit to being early on the trade market because sometimes that can help you get more value, right? That can help you, because you're letting a team jump in early as opposed to waiting. But then obviously if you have enough teams interested, then that can drive the price up.
Right.
Then you risk, guys getting hurt, whatever. Like, I don't know. There's all sorts of angles and ways they could go about it. I just think they're at the point where they're obviously I think it depends on how much they sell.
Right. And, I think also too, I think it goes back to your point. Like, kind of all depends on the next stretch of series. Like if they're down, if they're going to lose 2 series in a row, then that bat phone that they have in the front office is going to be even warmer than ever.
They have the toughest remaining schedule too. So like it again, it's like they got to play better and they're going to have to play really well against tough competition. I think there's only one series in here against Washington at home that you could say like, yeah, they're going to win that series. Like I could see them winning. All the other ones on the road at Kansas City, on the road at Texas, then they end with a homestand against the Yankees and the Guardians. And then you mentioned the second half getting off to a strong start, potentially the chance of that happening. Well, they open with a 4-game road series against the Yankees and then a 3-game series against Toronto. So,
I'm waving the white flag right now.
Yeah, so that's going to be, again, it's just going to have to be them turning it up a notch and a few notches against some of the best teams that they've played all year. So I don't expect that to happen. I certainly hope they come out and sweep the Twins, but it's asking a lot of this team right now, and that's unfortunate. It makes me sad more than anything because I get so excited about each season. So it's been a hot minute since they've had a kind of a clunker.
Yeah, I'm there with you, and we want to hear from you guys too as well in the comments of the show. What do you think about the Rays' status right now, and if they're going to be waving the white flag pretty soon with the next couple of series and then after the All-Star break. But I think we'll wrap it up for today. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in to the Rays Rewind podcast, the sickest Tampa Bay Rays podcast on the Sick Podcast Network. For myself and Drew, we will see you next time on the Rays Rewind podcast. See ya.
And that's a wrap. Hope you don't miss us too much until next time. Follow the Sick Podcast Rays Rewind with Buschman and Drew on YouTube, Google Play, and Apple Podcasts.